Alrighty, perfect. So we've gotten to the part where we're gonna do open coil springs. So we're gonna talk about open coil springs. If I can get it. All right, there it is. Open coil. We're gonna talk about closed coil. And we're gonna talk about elastic thread. Okay. So this is actually tubing. And then elastic thread. So this is thread. This is a elastomeric tube. This is the closed coil spring, and this is an open coil spring. And also, I'll just add in here some IPR information. So, and these are IPR strips, okay? All right, and we're gonna talk about all of these. So let's start talking about IPR. So IPR strips look like this, right? And when the next visit note says that we're gonna do interproximal reduction, it's probably because there is a lot of crowding and we wanna make room in between the interproximals to make the teeth have more ability to move because they have more space. So you always leave the interproximal reduction strip or the IPR strip right there for the doctor. If the next visit note says that we are gonna be doing IPR, he grabs the IPR strip and he actually goes and strips less than a millimeter between the teeth just to make a little bit of room for it to actually move. All right, so that's an IPR strip. Another way of interproximal reduction that's more aggressive is with a slow speed handpiece and a disc that has the interproximal reduction on it. So let's guess that we're gonna be doing interproximal reduction with a disc. Then at that point, you would get the slow speed handpiece, you would get the IPR disc, which looks like this, and you would literally put it inside the handpiece, lock it, and have it ready for him. And he will go ahead and disc in between. And this is a more aggressive form of disking. So if it does, of IPR. So if it just says IPR, get the strip. If it specifically says that we're gonna be doing IPR with a disc, then we get the disc and the slow speed handpiece and set that up for the doctor, okay? Now let's talk about open coil springs. We use open coil springs to make room for teeth to come in, to make room for a crowded tooth to be able to have room to move. And that's what we use open coil springs for. Now the open coil springs, the way that you place it and measure is in our office. We say half a bracket, a tooth active, or we say a millimeter, 2 millimeters. As you're gonna be in ortho, you're gonna get really familiar with millimeters, okay? So for example, if you want to activate the centrals because you need some space here, it's never gonna happen. You would literally put it here, measure it before you put it on the wire, and half a bracket active is about right there. You see that? Because you're measuring from here, from the back of the last bracket all the way to the half of the next bracket. That's a half a bracket active, and a half a bracket active is really little, okay? It's not a lot of movement. A full bracket active would be cutting it right here. You see how I am? You see how I am right here? And a full bracket active would be right here, cutting it right there. Right where my finger is right here. A full tooth active is very, very active, and it would be right here. Okay, and look at all that activation that's gonna be on that spring, right? So let's do a half a bracket active. So I'm literally gonna measure it in the patient's mouth. I'm gonna go like this, flush to this back of this bracket, all the way to the half of the bracket right here.
On the next tooth.
On the next tooth. And I'm measuring it, and holding it. And I get my ligature cutter, and I clasp it right there at the half a bracket, and I take it out and I cut. Hold it with one and hold this side too, and I cut. And now that's gonna be, this little piece is gonna be half a bracket active. I put it on my wire. Now, will you ever separate the centrals? No, you're never gonna separate the centrals. This is just an example, guys. Usually you'd be making room for a tooth to come in because there's so much crowding, you need more space. for things like that, or making space for a stuck tooth that's coming down, that's what you would use the open coil springs. I'm just showing you how to measure and how to actually place it, okay? So we put it in the wire. We put the open coil spring on the wire all the way to where we're making the space, which in this example, it's at the centrals. Once we put the open coil spring on the wire, then we can then put the wire in our 6s, one side, put it in our 6 on the other side, and get our wine guard, and then slide it into our 7s because this patient has 7s. All right, now we're gonna center the wire, and bring over your open coil spring. The wire is centered now. I brought over my open coil spring, and it's as you can see, it's sitting right above the bracket. It's not engaged to the bracket yet. At this point, I'm gonna grab my color, and I'm going to tie it in. So, of course, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to grab my color, and I'm gonna tie in one bracket and fully engage that bracket, just like this. Then, as you can see, you can actually tell that it's a half a bracket active, all right? And you're gonna grab your other color. You're going to push the open coil spring in between the brackets. Push, push, push. You can push with your finger, or you can push with the wine guard. You can grab the open coil and you can see how I'm moving it. You can push it with the wine guard as well. Did you see that? And then after it's in between the brackets, at that point you can now tie in your bracket. Just like that. And that is how you do an open coil spring. That's how you do the open coil spring. So basically, now let's pretend the patient has left. In 6 weeks or 4 weeks from now, they come back and the space is made. And now we need to hold the space there, right? Very rarely will you see that a doctor does a passive open coil spring. Typically, they use closed coil springs, which one of the doctors that we work with does use a closed coil spring to hold, because the open coil spring is to make space, the closed coil spring is to hold the space. So now we're going to use our fulcrum. We're gonna get these ties off, and that's why we have our fulcrum, because we don't want it to poke the patient. And we're gonna remove the wire, and we're gonna resize it with a closed coil spring, because at this point the space has been made. We're pretending, guys. And we're gonna go flush behind the bracket and flush behind the bracket. So now we measured it. Look at it here. Flush behind both brackets. You're gonna cut it right there, all right? So I'm gonna grab it, I'm gonna clasp it right there. And that piece right here is going to be flush. Let's test it out. We're gonna go ahead and we are going to grab our wire, remove the open coil spring. We're gonna place the closed coil spring, and we're gonna recenter our wire and do everything again that we usually do.
So that's just to keep the space.
Yep, to hold the space. Any questions, guys? All right. So sometimes there's gonna be times where in orthodontics, there is a tooth stuck, and the reason why the patient received the braces was to go ahead and to help a tooth come in. So as you can see here, this is a model, and I just thought it would be a good example because let's say this tooth was a tooth that didn't come in. It's stuck up there. There was 2 teeth crowding it, right here, joined together, and this tooth was stuck and unable to come in because of these 2 teeth. Well, we made space for it with an open coil spring, and the patient went to an oral surgeon for the oral surgeon to bond a chain to that tooth. And the chain looks like this, guys. The chain was bonded to this tooth right here. The oral surgeon bonded it, and it goes down to all the way here. And we, with an elastic thread now, pull this tooth up all the way until it gets to be right where all the other teeth are. Okay, so it's really cool to do this for the patient and help their teeth come in. This is more invasive orthodontics, right? So it's exciting to be a part of the journey with the patient. Once that tooth comes in, that patient is so happy. So what you do, right, is now we're gonna just switch it up here. And let's say that that was happening right in between here somewhere, all right? And we have our eyelet right here, okay? So you're always gonna put the thread through the closest link to the gum, the closest link to the wire, right? So, Emily, can you hold this for me? Right there, right here. You can actually hold it right here. Let's make it a little challenge. Just hold it somehow in place right there. Man, this is gonna be difficult. All right, hold it with this, right there. This is bonded, okay? Oh my God, this is not gonna work. All right, well, you basically put the thread through the closest link to the wire. All right, you cut a piece of the thread. I cut a pretty long piece. So I cut about this much when I'm actually doing it on a physical patient. I cut about this much. For today, I'm just gonna cut a little bit just so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. I put the thread through the actual closest link to the wire. So just like this. And then we wanna tie it to the wire unless otherwise indicated by the doctor, all right? So let's go ahead and tie. Let's do a tie. So let's say that we are tying. So the way that you would do it is you would put the link is through the hole. Then you would put the link through the wire. And then you would literally tie it to the wire. Tight, 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 tight. Hold it. Do another